In early 1944, General Henry Arnold faced a calculus problem. American bombers were being destroyed faster than factories could replace them. His expansion of long-range escort coverage depended on maintaining fighter presence over German airspace for hours without breaking formation. When Luftwaffe pilots encountered red-tailed P-51 Mustangs refusing to chase decoys, they reported escort discipline they had not seen before. The 332nd Fighter Group had become operationally critical to Arnold's air campaign sustainability. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. We're really curious. We hope you enjoy listening to this story. By autumn 1943, the United States Army Air Forces confronted a fundamental operational crisis over European airspace. Daylight precision bombing, the cornerstone of American strategic doctrine, was producing unsustainable losses. The August raids on Regensburg and Schweinfurt demonstrated the vulnerability. Of the 376 B-17 flying fortresses dispatched, 60 were destroyed and 168 returned with battle damage. Crew casualties exceeded 600 men in a single day. The numbers indicated a structural problem, not isolated bad luck. The core issue was range. American P-47 Thunderbolt and P-38 Lightning fighters could escort bombers only partway into German territory before fuel reserves forced them to turn back. Luftwaffe controllers recognized this limitation and adjusted tactics accordingly. German fighters held formations at distance, waiting for the moment when American escorts reached their operational radius and withdrew. Once bombers crossed into undefended airspace, concentrated attacks began. The loss rates during these unescorted segments sometimes exceeded 10% per mission. General Henry Arnold, commanding the Army Air Forces, understood that continued losses at this rate would force abandonment of daylight operations entirely. Britain's Royal Air Force had already shifted to night bombing after suffering prohibitive daytime casualties in 1940. If American doctrine followed the same trajectory, strategic bombing campaigns targeting German industrial capacity would lose precision and effectiveness. Night bombing produced scattered results. Factories, rail yards, and oil refineries required daylight accuracy to destroy efficiently. Arnold's solution depended on extending fighter coverage across the entire bomber route. This required aircraft with sufficient fuel capacity to accompany heavy bombers from bases in England and Italy to targets deep inside Germany and return. The North American P-51 Mustang provided that capability. With external drop tanks, the P-51 could match bomber range while maintaining speed and maneuverability advantages over German interceptors. But range alone did not solve the problem. Escort doctrine required disciplined execution. Fighter pilots trained for aggressive pursuit and aerial combat had to suppress natural instincts to chase enemy aircraft. Luftwaffe pilots exploited this tendency by flying diversionary feints away from bomber formations. When escorts pursued, bombers became vulnerable. Arnold's directive to fighter commands was explicit: remain with the bombers regardless of provocation. Do not break formation, do not pursue individual targets. Success would be measured not by enemy fighters destroyed, but by bombers returned safely. Implementation of this doctrine required expanding the number of available escort groups and ensuring consistent adherence to formation discipline across all units. The operational demands were significant. Bombers flew missions lasting 8 to 10 hours. Escort rotations had to maintain continuous coverage, with different fighter groups relieving each other at designated navigation points. Any gap in coverage presented an opportunity for German attack. The system demanded reliable performance from every assigned unit. The 332nd Fighter Group, composed entirely of black pilots and commanded by Colonel Benjamin Davis, received orders in late 1943 to deploy to Italy and assume escort duties with the 15th Air Force. The assignment was operationally significant. The 15th Air Force, based in southern Italy, conducted bombing campaigns against targets in Austria, southern Germany, and the Balkans. These missions faced the same escort gap problems that plagued 8th Air Force operations from England. Arnold's air superiority campaign required simultaneous pressure from multiple directions. The 332nd would become part of that distributed system. What made this assignment structurally important was not symbolic. The 15th Air Force conducted raids with smaller escort pools than the 8th Air Force. Each fighter group carried proportionally greater responsibility for mission success. If the 332nd failed to maintain formation discipline or achieve operational readiness standards, bomber losses in the Mediterranean theater would increase measurably. The group's performance would directly affect Arnold's ability to sustain his strategic bombing campaign across two fronts. Operational dependency, not representation, defined the stakes. Arnold's directive to fighter commands in early 1944 formalized principles that had emerged from operational failures in 1943. The orders were specific: Fighter groups assigned to bomber escort would remain with bomber formations throughout the mission. Engagement with enemy fighters was authorized only when those fighters directly threatened bomber groups. Pursuit beyond visual range of bombers was prohibited. Fuel management would prioritize return escort legs as heavily as outbound coverage. The operational logic was straightforward. Each B-17 or B-24 heavy bomber carried 10 crew members and represented significant industrial investment. A single bomber loss meant 10 trained personnel removed from the campaign, along with the aircraft manufacturing cost and bomb load capacity. Fighter aircraft carried 1 pilot. The exchange rate favored protecting bombers even at the cost of foregoing fighter kill opportunities. Arnold's metric for escort success was explicit. Bomber losses during escorted mission segments should approach 0. This doctrinal shift required changes in fighter pilot training and evaluation. Previously, fighter effectiveness had been measured primarily through aerial victory credits. Pilots competed for confirmed kills. Squadron reputations were built on enemy aircraft destroyed. Arnold's orders reoriented priorities toward protective coverage. A mission in which no enemy aircraft were shot down but all bombers returned safely was more valuable than a mission with multiple kills but bomber losses. This redefinition of success created friction with existing fighter pilot culture, but operational necessity overrode tradition. The 15th Air Force received these directives with particular urgency. Operating from bases around Foggia, Italy, the 15th conducted long-range missions over heavily defended targets including Ploesti oil fields in Romania, aircraft factories in Regensburg, ball-bearing plants in Steyr and marshalling yards in Austria. These missions required crossing the Alps, often in poor weather, and penetrating airspace defended by experienced Luftwaffe units. Escort coordination was complicated by mountainous terrain that disrupted radio communication and limited visual navigation. Colonel Benjamin Davis received orders to move the 332nd Fighter Group from training operations in the United States to combat deployment at Ramitelli Airfield near Termoli, Italy. The group would fly P-51 Mustangs, the aircraft with sufficient range to escort bombers throughout their mission profiles. The 332nd's assignment included primary escort duty for heavy bomber groups of the 15th Air Force. The group's 4 squadrons, the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd, would rotate through mission schedules that averaged 20 to 30 sorties per week. Arnold's expectation was unambiguous. The 332nd would achieve the same performance standards required of all escort groups. Aircraft availability rates had to remain above 70%. Pilot readiness had to support daily operations. Formation discipline had to match doctrine. There were no modified standards, no experimental protocols, no provisional classifications. The group would operate as a standard component of the escort system, or it would fail operationally. The tactical execution of escort duty followed established procedures. Fighter groups would rendezvous with bomber formations at designated coordinates, typically as bombers crossed from friendly to contested airspace. Escorts flew in stacked formations above and to the sides of bomber boxes, maintaining visual contact while scanning for incoming threats. When enemy fighters approached, escort elements would intercept before attackers reached bomber range. The objective was disruption, not destruction. Forcing enemy fighters to break off their attack runs satisfied mission requirements even if no kills resulted. Communication protocols relied on radio discipline and visual signals. Bomber group leaders communicated with escort commanders through designated frequencies. Course changes, altitude adjustments, and threat warnings required rapid transmission and acknowledgement. Fighter pilots had to balance situational awareness across multiple dimensions, monitoring bomber formations, scanning for enemy aircraft, tracking fuel consumption, navigating terrain, and maintaining unit cohesion. The cognitive workload was substantial, particularly during missions lasting 4 to 6 hours. Arnold's orders carried implicit consequences. Units that failed to maintain bomber protection would be reassigned or restructured. Commanders who could not enforce formation discipline would be replaced. The campaign's operational demands were unforgiving. Thousands of bomber crew members depended on escort effectiveness for survival. Industrial targets required destruction to degrade German war production capacity. The strategic bombing campaign represented one of the few means available to directly attack German infrastructure before ground invasion. Failure was not abstractly unacceptable, it was operationally unaffordable. The 332nd Fighter Group began combat operations in February 1944. The system test had begun. The operational effectiveness of any fighter group depended on interlocking support systems that extended far beyond pilot skill. Aircraft had to be maintained, fueled, armed, and repaired continuously. Radio equipment required calibration. Engines needed inspection after specified flight hours. Battle damage had to be assessed and corrected. The 332nd Fighter Group's ability to meet mission schedules relied on ground crew performance at Ramaitelli Airfield. Each P-51 Mustang required approximately 20 maintenance personnel to sustain combat readiness. Engine mechanics, armorers, radio technicians, hydraulics specialists, and sheet metal workers performed tasks that determined whether aircraft could fly the next mission. The Allison and later Rolls-Royce Merlin engines powering the P-51s demanded precise maintenance intervals. Oil changes, spark plug replacements, and valve adjustments followed strict schedules. Any deviation risked engine failure over enemy territory. Armament crews loaded .50 caliber machine gun ammunition belts into wing compartments, a process requiring both speed and precision. 6 guns per aircraft, approximately 1,800 rounds total, had to be loaded and checked before each mission. Ammunition feeding systems jammed if belts were improperly seated. Gun bore cleaning after missions prevented corrosion that could cause malfunctions. The difference between functional and failed weapons often determined pilot survival during engagements. Fuel logistics presented constant challenges. Each P-51 consumed approximately 100 gallons of fuel per hour at combat power settings. Missions lasting 5 hours required internal and external tank capacity totaling 500 gallons or more. Fuel had to be transporting from supply depots to Ramaitelli, stored safely, and pumped into aircraft without contamination. Water or sediment in fuel caused engine failure. Quality control during refueling operations was not optional. Ground crews worked in rotating shifts to maintain operational tempo. When pilots returned from morning missions, maintenance teams immediately began post-flight inspections. Aircraft with battle damage moved to repair stations. Those requiring only routine servicing received faster turnaround. The objective was returning the maximum number of aircraft to ready status for the next mission cycle, often within 12 hours. This pace continued 6 days per week. The 332nd maintenance records indicate aircraft availability rates consistently above 70%, meeting 15th Air Force standards. This performance required ground crew efficiency that matched or exceeded other fighter groups. Delays in maintenance created cascading effects. Fewer available aircraft meant remaining pilots flew more frequent missions, increasing fatigue. Mission commanders had less flexibility in assigning escorts. Bomber groups received thinner coverage. Logistical supply lines stretched from ports in Naples through roadways to Ramaitelli. Replacement parts for damaged aircraft traveled this route. So did ammunition, fuel, food, medical supplies, and all other materials required for sustained operations. Disruptions in supply affected readiness directly. If spark plugs were delayed, engines could not be serviced. If ammunition shipments were short, aircraft flew with reduced combat loads. The 332nd depended on supply chain reliability beyond its direct control. Whether complicated operations throughout the Mediterranean theater, winter storms grounded aircraft, spring rains turned airfield surfaces into mud, requiring continuous maintenance of taxiways and runways. Ground crews worked in conditions that ranged from freezing temperatures in winter to extreme heat in summer. Equipment shelters provided limited protection. Maintenance often occurred outdoors under tactical conditions. Personnel health directly affected operational capacity. Illness, injury, or combat fatigue reduced available manpower. The 332nd's personnel system had to maintain sufficient depth to absorb losses and sustain workload. Unlike bomber groups that received replacement crews through established pipelines, fighter groups drew from smaller pilot training pools. The Tuskegee training program produced replacement pilots for the 332nd, but pipeline capacity limited surge ability. Every pilot lost to combat, accident, or illness represented a capability gap difficult to fill rapidly. Communication networks tied the 332nd into broader 15th Air Force operations. Mission briefings transmitted target information, weather forecasts, escort rendezvous coordinates, and threat assessments. Intelligence updates identified Luftwaffe unit locations and recent tactical patterns. Navigation data provided course headings, checkpoint coordinates, and alternate landing sites if weather or damage prevented return to Ramaitelli. The group functioned as a node within a larger information and command system. The operational dependency was mutual. The 332nd relied on supply, intelligence, and command infrastructure to function. Bomber groups relied on the 332nd to provide escort coverage that doctrine required. General Arnold's strategic campaign relied on both bombers and escorts performing assigned roles. Remove any component and the system degraded. The 332nd was not peripheral to operations. It was integrated into mission-critical functions that determined campaign success or failure. Mission profiles for 15th Air Force bomber operations presented consistent environmental and tactical challenges. Flights from Italy to targets in Austria, southern Germany, and the Balkans required crossing the Alps or navigating narrow Adriatic corridors, where the patterns in mountainous regions changed rapidly. Clear conditions at departure could deteriorate into cloud cover, icing, and visibility restrictions by the time formations reached target areas. Alpine weather systems created turbulence that disrupted bomber formations. Tight formations provided concentrated defensive firepower against fighter attacks. When turbulence scattered formations, bombers became isolated and vulnerable. Escort fighters had to adjust positions constantly to maintain coverage across widened formations. Fuel consumption increased when fighters maneuvered frequently to track bomber movements. Winter operations brought additional complications. Temperature at altitude dropped well below freezing. Gun mechanisms froze if not properly lubricated. Cockpit heating systems in P-51s provided minimal protection. Pilots endured 4 to 6 hour missions in conditions that induced cold-related fatigue. Frostbite affected pilots who touched metal controls without gloves. Physical discomfort degraded concentration during periods when alertness was operationally critical. Luftwaffe tactics evolved in response to increased escort presence. German controllers identified which American fighter groups maintained strict formation discipline and which could be baited into pursuit. When Luftwaffe pilots encountered the red-tailed P-51s of the 332nd, they tested escort commitment through feint attacks. Small groups of German fighters would approach bomber formations at high speed, then veer away before entering effective range. The intent was to provoke escort response. If fighters pursued the retreating Germans, larger formations waited to attack the now exposed bombers. The 332nd response to these tactics became predictable to German observers but not exploitable. Escort elements remained positioned with bomber formations regardless of provocation. When German fighters committed to actual attack runs, 332nd pilots intercepted but did not pursue beyond the point where attackers broke off. This discipline frustrated Luftwaffe tactics designed around escort predictability. German pilots could no longer rely on drawing escorts away from bombers. Radio communication during missions carried both tactical coordination and evidence of pressure. Transmissions included threat callouts identifying incoming fighters by altitude and direction. Bomber commanders reported damage status and requested escort attention to specific formation elements. Fighter pilots coordinated intercept assignments to avoid duplicate coverage or gaps. Voice discipline sometimes degraded under combat stress, requiring flight leaders to restore communication order. Combat engagements over defended targets involved split-second decision-making under constraints. Pilots had to identify aircraft as friendly or enemy, often at distances and angles that made recognition difficult. German Bf-109s and FW-190s had performance characteristics similar to American fighters. Misidentification could result in attacking friendly aircraft or hesitating against actual threats. Recognition training emphasized silhouette details and flight behavior patterns. Flak, the German anti-aircraft artillery, posed threats distinct from fighter attacks. Flak concentrations over high-value targets created explosive barriers that bomber formations had to penetrate. Escort fighters flew above flak zones when possible, but supporting bombers through defended areas sometimes required descending into flak range. Aircraft struck by flak fragments experienced control failures, fuel leaks, and engine damage. Pilots with damaged aircraft faced decisions about attempting return to base or bailing out over enemy territory. The 332nd flew missions against targets throughout the region assigned to 15th Air Force operations. Ploesti oil refineries in Romania represented high-priority strategic targets defended by concentrated flak and fighter units. Raids on Ploesti involved extended flight times over hostile territory with limited emergency landing options. Vienna, Munich, and Linz required penetrating airspace defended by experienced Luftwaffe units equipped with the latest German fighters. One mission profile involved escorting bombers to Berlin on March 24, 1945. This represented one of the deepest penetration missions for 15th Air Force units. The distance required careful fuel management and near-perfect navigation. German defenders knew Berlin raids were coming and positioned fighter reserves accordingly. During this mission, Captain Roscoe Brown engaged German Me-262 jet fighters, aircraft significantly faster than propeller-driven P-51s. Brown's successful interception of a Me-262 demonstrated that despite speed disadvantages, tactical positioning could neutralize technological superiority. Missions accumulated. The 332nd flew more than 200 escort missions between February 1944 and war's end in May 1945. Each mission repeated the operational cycle: pre-flight briefing, aircraft preparation, rendezvous with bombers, escort through hostile airspace, Combat if engaged, return to base, debriefing and preparation for the next mission. The repetitive nature of operations tested endurance as much as skill. Operational records maintained by the 15th Air Force provide documented evidence of 332nd Fighter Group performance throughout the Italian campaign. These records tracked mission participation, aircraft losses, enemy aircraft destroyed, and bomber protection effectiveness. The metrics established basis for evaluating whether the group met operational standards required by Escort doctrine. Between February 1944 and May 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group flew 311 missions and 15,533 sorties. These figures represent sustained operational tempo consistent with other fighter groups in the theater. Mission frequency averaged approximately 20 sorties per week, accounting for weather delays and maintenance cycles. The sortie total indicates consistent aircraft availability and pilot readiness throughout the deployment period. The group's pilots were credited with 112 aerial victories against German aircraft. These credits were confirmed through multiple sources including gun camera footage, witness statements from bomber crews, and wreckage verification when possible. The total included Bf-109 and Fw-190 fighters, the primary Luftwaffe interceptors, as well as bomber aircraft and reconnaissance planes. Significantly, the 332nd recorded 3 confirmed victories against Me-262 jet fighters, aircraft that represented Germany's technological attempt to regain air superiority. Captain Roscoe Brown accounted for one of these Me-262 victories on March 24, 1945, during the Berlin Escort mission. Brown's encounter demonstrated tactical principles relevant beyond individual achievement. The Me-262 possessed speed advantages exceeding 100 miles per hour over the P-51. In level flight, the jet could not be caught. Brown's success came from positioning and anticipation. He observed the Me-262's attack pattern against bomber formations, predicted its flight path, and positioned his aircraft to intercept during the German pilot's maneuvering phase when speed advantage was temporarily reduced. The victory confirmed that technological superiority could be countered through tactical discipline. Ground attack missions supplemented escort duties. The 332nd destroyed or damaged approximately 150 aircraft on the ground at German airfields. These missions targeted parked aircraft, hangars, and fuel storage facilities. Ground attack operations carried high risk. Airfields were defended by concentrated flak, and attacking aircraft had to descend into effective range while maintaining stable flight paths for accurate strafing. The 332nd lost multiple aircraft to ground fire during these missions, but continued flying them as assigned. The group also destroyed or damaged 950 ground vehicles, including trucks, trains, and armored vehicles. These interdiction missions disrupted German logistics and troop movements. Strategic bombing targeted factories and refineries. Tactical interdiction targeted the transportation networks that distributed their output. Both functions contributed to degrading German military capacity. Bomber groups escorted by the 332nd reported outcomes that supported claims of effective protection. While exact statistical comparisons remain subject to historical debate due to variable mission profiles and reporting methods, bomber crews consistently noted that red-tailed escorts maintained formation discipline. 15th Air Force records indicate that missions escorted by the 332nd experienced bomber loss rates within acceptable operational parameters. No bomber group lost all its aircraft during a mission escorted by the 332nd, a distinction reflecting mission success by Arnold's doctrinal standards. The 332nd lost 66 pilots killed in action during the war. An additional 32 were shot down and captured as prisoners of war. These casualties represented approximately 1/3 of the group's pilot strength, requiring continuous replacement flow from training pipelines. Loss rates were comparable to other fighter groups in the theater, indicating the 332nd faced equivalent risk levels while performing equivalent missions. Individual decorations included 1 Silver Star, 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and over 700 air medals awarded to 332nd personnel. These awards reflected mission performance and combat achievement according to established award criteria. The decorations were not participation recognition. They resulted from actions meeting specific standards for valor, achievement, or service. The group received a Distinguished Unit Citation for a mission flown on March 24, 1945, the same date as Brown's Me-262 victory. The citation recognized the group's performance escorting bombers to Berlin against heavy opposition. The unit citation represented recognition at organizational level rather than individual level, acknowledging sustained effectiveness across multiple crews and missions. Operational records also documented what did not happen. The 332nd was not withdrawn from combat duty due to performance deficiency. The group was not reassigned to secondary missions due to inability to meet escort standards. Aircraft availability and sortie rates did not decline below operational thresholds. Mission assignments continued at full tempo through war's end. These negative indicators, the absence of operational failure, constituted evidence as significant as positive achievements. Systems that function reliably rarely draw attention specifically because they do not fail. Luftwaffe tactical doctrine in 1944 and 1945 underwent forced evolution in response to deteriorating strategic circumstances. German fighter forces faced multiple compounding pressures: fuel shortages, declining pilot experience levels, numerical inferiority, and increasingly effective Allied escort tactics. The adjustments German commanders made reflected recognition that air superiority had shifted irreversibly. German pilots operating against 15th Air Force bomber streams developed recognition patterns for different American escort units. These patterns were based on observed behavior during combat encounters. Some escort groups maintained loose formations that could be split through aggressive feints. Others pursued German fighters beyond bomber coverage zones, creating exploitable gaps. Luftwaffe pilots briefed these patterns during mission preparation to identify tactical opportunities. The red-tailed P-51s of the 332nd became identifiable through repeated encounters. German pilot reports noted escorts that refused to break formation regardless of provocation. Luftwaffe tactical manuals from the period emphasized exploiting aggressive tendencies in Allied fighter pilots. When those tendencies were absent, German attack options narrowed. The standard tactic of drawing escorts away from bombers lost effectiveness against units that prioritized bomber protection over fighter engagement. Adolf Galland, commanding general of Luftwaffe fighter forces, documented the degradation of German fighter effectiveness in reports and post-war testimony. Galland identified multiple factors contributing to this decline. Allied numerical superiority meant German fighters faced unfavorable engagement ratios. Fuel shortages limited training time for replacement pilots, reducing their survival probability during initial combat missions. The quality of replacement aircraft declined as German industrial capacity degraded under strategic bombing. Galland's assessments also acknowledged the effectiveness of Allied escort doctrine. German fighters could no longer reliably intercept bomber formations without suffering prohibitive losses to escort screens. The shift from offensive tactical flexibility to defensive desperation appeared in Luftwaffe operational orders. By late 1944, German fighter units received orders to concentrate attacks on bomber formations, even when doing so meant accepting high casualties from escorts. The introduction of Me-262 jet fighters represented Germany's technological response to tactical failure. The Me-262's speed advantage theoretically allowed attacks on bomber formations with reduced exposure to escort interception. German pilots could approach at high speed, fire rockets or cannon into bomber boxes, then accelerate away before escorts could respond. This tactic worked when German pilots executed it correctly and when Me-262s were available in sufficient numbers. Neither condition held consistently. Me-262 production suffered from Allied bombing of manufacturing facilities and shortages of critical materials. Training pilots to operate jets required time and fuel Germany did not have. Mechanical reliability problems grounded aircraft frequently. When Me-262s did engage bomber formations, Allied escort pilots learned to attack during vulnerable phases of the German jet's flight profile: takeoff, landing, and maneuvering. The 332nd's 3 confirmed Me-262 victories demonstrated that jets did not provide immunity from tactical skill. Luftwaffe defensive emphasis shifted increasingly toward flak as fighter effectiveness declined. Anti-aircraft artillery required less fuel than fighters and could be operated by personnel unsuitable for other combat roles. Flak concentrations over German cities and industrial targets reached densities that forced bomber formations to absorb losses regardless of escort quality. However, flak could not pursue bomber formations or intercept them before reaching targets. It represented defensive last resort, not operational solution. German fighter pilot casualties mounted throughout 1944 and 1945. Experienced pilots who survived years of combat were killed at increasing rates as mission tempo intensified and fuel limitations reduced their tactical options. Replacement pilots entered combat with minimal flight hours and often did not survive their first encounters with Allied formations. The decline in Luftwaffe pilot quality created self-reinforcing degradation. Less experienced pilots achieved fewer victories and died more quickly, further depleting the experienced pilot pool. By early 1945, German fighter opposition over certain target areas had become sporadic. Some bomber missions encountered no fighter attacks at all. This absence did not indicate German strategic choice, it reflected inability to mount effective resistance. Fuel shortages sometimes grounded entire fighter units. When aircraft were available and fueled, pilot availability or mechanical readiness often prevented missions. The Luftwaffe's forced adjustments in response to Allied escort tactics confirmed escort doctrine's effectiveness. German commanders adapted because they had to, not because they chose to experiment with new approaches. The consistent escort presence maintained by groups including the 332nd DENI Germany, the tactical flexibility its doctrine required. That denial contributed directly to Allied air superiority over Europe. Sustained combat operations over 15 months required organizational resilience that extended beyond pilot skill or aircraft performance. The 332nd Fighter Group maintained operational effectiveness through systems that absorbed losses, sustained logistics, managed personnel, and preserved institutional capability despite continuous pressure. Understanding why the group did not suffer operational collapse requires examining these supporting structures. Ground crew performance determined daily aircraft availability. Each P-51 returning from a mission underwent inspection following established protocols. Maintenance personnel checked control surfaces for damage, inspected engine mounts and cowlings, examined hydraulic systems, tested radio equipment, and verified structural integrity. Battle damage assessment determined whether aircraft could be repaired at squadron level or required depot-level maintenance. This sorting process had to occur rapidly to maximize the number of aircraft available for the next mission. Repair cycles followed prioritized workflows. Minor damage such as bullet holes in non-structural areas could be patched quickly using aluminium sheets and rivets. Hydraulic line damage required replacement components and system testing. Engine problems necessitated troubleshooting to determine whether repair or engine replacement was appropriate. Ground crews worked through these procedures simultaneously on multiple aircraft, coordinating resource allocation to optimize overall availability. Supply logistics operated through defined channels connecting Ramitelli Airfield to theater supply depots. Critical items such as engines, propellers, and armament components received priority routing. Standard parts such as tires, spark plugs, and hydraulic fluid were requisitioned through regular supply schedules. The supply system included buffer stocks at group level to handle short-term fluctuations in consumption rates. When supply chain disruptions occurred, maintenance personnel improvised using salvaged components from aircraft too damaged for economical repair. Pilot replacement flow sustained squadron strength despite combat losses. The Tuskegee training pipeline produced pilots who progressed through primary, basic, and advanced flight training before receiving combat transition training in P-51s. New pilots arriving in Italy underwent additional theater orientation covering navigation, weather patterns, radio procedures, and tactical doctrines specific to 15th Air Force operations. This training pipeline maintained continuity despite the 20 to 30 pilot losses the group sustained during the campaign. Combat fatigue management required rotation policies that balanced operational demands against pilot effectiveness degradation. Pilots flying frequent missions under high stress experienced cumulative effects that reduced reaction speed, judgment quality, and situational awareness. Flight surgeons monitored pilot health and recommended rest periods when fatigue indicators appeared. Squadron commanders had to balance mission requirements against pilot capability, sometimes flying missions with reduced strength rather than flying fatigued pilots. Leadership continuity within the group preserved institutional knowledge and operational standards. Colonel Benjamin Davis commanded the group throughout its combat deployment, providing stable command presence. Squadron commanders maintained consistent leadership with limited turnover. This continuity meant tactical lessons learned in early missions informed procedures in later missions. Units that experienced frequent leadership changes often repeated mistakes or lost doctrinal discipline. The 332nd maintained procedural consistency. Maintenance officer leadership ensured ground crew effectiveness matched pilot performance. Engineering officers supervised maintenance workflows, allocated personnel across different specialties, prioritized repair tasks, and maintained quality control standards. The technical nature of aircraft maintenance meant that corner cutting or procedural deviations created safety risks that could cause aircraft losses unrelated to enemy action. Maintenance discipline prevented self-inflicted operational degradation. Administrative systems tracked personnel status, mission records, supply consumption, maintenance hours, and other data required for operational management. These records informed decision-making about resource allocation and capability assessment. Units that lost administrative discipline also lost ability to identify emerging problems before they became critical. The 332nd maintained record-keeping standards that supported operational planning. Morale factors influenced organizational resilience in ways difficult to quantify but operationally significant. The 332nd operated under conditions that included racial segregation, limited recognition in official communications, and awareness that performance failures would be attributed to racial characteristics rather than normal operational variance. These pressures created additional stress beyond standard combat conditions. The group's sustained performance, despite these factors, indicated morale levels sufficient to maintain cohesion under pressure. Weather and seasonal factors affected operations throughout the deployment. Winter conditions reduced mission frequency but increased maintenance workload due to cold weather effects on aircraft systems. Spring and summer brought higher mission tempo but better flying weather. The group adapted operational rhythms to seasonal patterns while maintaining readiness standards. The 332nd did not experience organizational collapse because its supporting systems functioned reliably. Ground crews maintained aircraft, supply lines delivered materials, training pipelines replaced losses, leadership preserved standards, administration tracked status. These unglamorous functions determined whether the group could fly missions consistently. Operational resilience came from system depth, not individual heroism. The structure supporting combat operations absorbed stress, distributed workload, and maintained capacity through 15 months of combat. That structural integrity made sustained performance possible. The historical record of American military operations in World War II developed through processes that prioritized certain narratives while marginalizing others. Post-war documentation emphasized strategic leadership, decisive battles, and technological achievements. Operational histories focused on commanding generals, army group movements, and campaign outcomes. The detailed work of sustaining those operations received less attention in official accounts and public memory. The 332nd Fighter Group's combat record existed in official files maintained by the Army Air Forces and later the United States Air Force. Mission reports, personnel records, and unit histories were archived according to standard procedures. These documents contained comprehensive data about sorties flown, casualties sustained, and missions completed. However, accessibility and prominence of these records within broader historical narratives varied significantly. Military histories published in the immediate post-war period concentrated on European theater leadership and major operations. Accounts of the strategic bombing campaign discussed General Arnold's directives, the development of Escort doctrine, and the effectiveness of bombing against German industrial targets. Fighter groups were mentioned collectively as components of the Escort system. Individual group achievements received limited detailed coverage except in specialized unit histories. The racial segregation that characterized American military forces during World War II extended into post-war documentation. Black units were often documented separately from white units in organizational charts and historical accounts. This separation created structural conditions where black unit contributions could be omitted from general histories without appearing to leave gaps. The historical narrative framework treated segregated units as supplementary rather than integral. Public recognition patterns reflected these documentary emphases. Congressional Medals of Honor from World War II went predominantly to white service members. Distinguished Service Crosses, Silver Stars, and other valor decorations followed similar demographic patterns despite black service members comprising approximately 10% of American military personnel. The award system was not explicitly discriminatory in criteria, but implementation involved subjective judgment at multiple levels where racial attitudes influenced outcomes. The 332nd Fighter Group received a Distinguished Unit Citation in 1945, indicating official recognition of unit-level achievement. However, broader public awareness of the group's operations remained limited for decades. Popular histories, films, and media coverage of World War II focused on better-known units and battles. The Tuskegee Airmen existed in historical record, but not in popular consciousness. Several structural factors contributed to this marginalization. First, escort fighter operations were less narratively dramatic than strategic bombing or ground combat. Fighter pilots flew missions that involved long periods of patrol without engagement, followed by brief combat when enemy fighters appeared. The primary measure of success was bombers returning safely, which did not produce compelling visual narratives. Second, the 332nd operated in the Mediterranean theater, which received less attention than the Northwest Europe campaign. Third, post-war Air Force integration under Executive Order 9981 in 1948 led to disbanding segregated units. removing organizational continuity that might have preserved unit history prominence. The Cold War period brought renewed emphasis on American military capability and unity. Historical narratives stressed national cohesion and technological superiority. Stories highlighting racial segregation in the military conflicted with contemporary integration efforts and international propaganda needs. Historical accounts that might have drawn attention to segregated unit achievements also risked drawing attention to segregation itself, creating institutional disincentive for prominent coverage. Veteran advocacy gradually increased awareness. Tuskegee Airmen organizations formed to preserve unit history and educate public audiences. These efforts worked outside official military history channels, relying on veteran testimony, preserved documents, and educational outreach. Progress was incremental and dependent on veteran initiative rather than institutional support. Academic historical research beginning in the 1970s and accelerating in the 1980s brought increased scholarly attention to black military service. Historians examining race and military policy documented the 332nd record in detail. These academic works established factual foundations but reached limited audiences beyond educational institutions. Congressional recognition came in 2007 when the Tuskegee Airmen collectively received the Congressional Gold Medal. This recognition acknowledged both military achievement and the delay in recognition itself. The medal represented official acknowledgement of contributions that had existed in documentary record for 60 years, but remained outside prominent historical narratives. The pattern was consistent across military history. Units performing operational roles that enabled strategic success received less recognition than units executing dramatic tactical actions. Labor that sustained systems was documented but not celebrated. The 332nd post-war historical silence reflected these broader patterns combined with racial marginalization specific to segregated units. Military operations succeed or fail based on system performance, not isolated heroic actions. Strategic objectives require coordination across multiple organizational levels, sustained logistics, reliable communication, and consistent execution of doctrine. The historical record of World War II demonstrates this principle repeatedly. Campaigns that are remembered for decisive leadership or technological advantage depended equally on operational depth that sustained those advantages over time. The 332nd Fighter Group's operational record illustrates system dependency in specific terms. General Arnold's strategic bombing campaign required escort coverage. Escort coverage required fighter groups that maintained formation discipline. Formation discipline required trained pilots, maintained aircraft, fuel supplies, ammunition, spare parts, and all supporting infrastructure that enabled daily missions. Remove any component and the system degraded. The 332nd was not peripheral to this system. It was integrated into mission-critical functions. This integration carries implications beyond the specific history of one fighter group. It demonstrates that military effectiveness depends on distributed competence throughout organizational structures. The quality of maintenance crews affects aircraft availability. The efficiency of supply systems affects operational tempo. The depth of training pipelines affects ability to absorb losses. These operational realities exist regardless of the demographic composition of units, but they become historically significant when examining units whose competence was questioned on racial grounds before their performance was observed. The 332nd combat record provided empirical evidence that contradicted racial assumptions prevalent in American military policy in the 1940s. The group flew the same missions as other fighter groups. It faced the same enemy opposition. It sustained comparable losses and achieved comparable results. The operational data did not support claims that black service members were unsuitable for combat roles requiring technical skill and sustained performance under pressure. This evidence contributed to post-war integration decisions, though those decisions also involved political, social, and institutional factors beyond purely military considerations. Operational integration proceeded gradually after Executive Order 9981. The process involved policy changes, leadership directives, personnel reassignments, and cultural adaptation across military services. The Air Force completed integration faster than other services, partially because its technical demands made inefficient personnel policies operationally costly. Maintaining separate maintenance schools, pilot training programs, and unit structures consumed resources without producing capability advantages. Integration improved operational efficiency by allowing assignment based on skill rather than race. The historical memory of World War II continues to emphasize strategic leadership and decisive battles. Normandy invasion, Battle of the Bulge, Pacific Island campaigns, and strategic bombing receive prominent coverage in popular histories, films, and educational materials. These narratives focus on generals, dramatic tactical situations, and clear victory moments. The operational labor that sustained campaigns appears less frequently in popular memory. This pattern is not unique to World War II or to racial aspects of military history. Military operations of all types depend on logistics, maintenance, supply, and administrative functions that rarely appear in historical narratives unless they fail dramatically. Systems that function reliably become invisible precisely because they do not fail. The historical emphasis on leadership and tactics over logistics and sustainment reflects narrative preferences rather than operational reality. The 332nd Fighter Group's historical significance exists on multiple levels. At operational level, the group contributed to Allied air superiority over Europe by performing assigned escort duties competently. At institutional level, the group's performance provided evidence used in integration policy debates. At historical level, the group's record challenges narratives that attribute military success exclusively to strategic leadership while minimizing operational labor. Understanding this history requires examining system dependencies that military operations create. Bomber crews depended on escort protection, escorts depended on aircraft maintenance, maintenance depended on supply logistics, supply depended on theater infrastructure. Each dependency connected individual performance to larger operational outcomes. The 332nd occupied specific nodes in this dependency network. Its performance at those nodes directly affected mission success. Wars are remembered through leaders who made strategic decisions and battles that produced decisive outcomes. The systems that connected strategy to outcome, that transformed decisions into executed operations, that sustained forces over extended campaigns, these systems fade from memory unless specific effort preserves their history. The 332nd Fighter Group's operations during World War II were operationally critical and historically marginalized simultaneously. Both conditions were real, both deserve recognition. The historical meaning lies not in correcting one narrative error, but in understanding how military systems function and how that functioning gets remembered.